Hello, my name is Joel Randall. I'm doing a debate on the impact of young trees in construction. Um, I used to work in a lumber yard, and a lot of my experience shows that these loggers are cutting down smaller trees, the lumber mills are cutting down small trees, and I heard a lot of complaints, but at the same time, I can see why they're doing it. So it's pretty well known that trees are getting smaller, the trees that they're sending to lumber yards and, sawmills, stuff like that. So here's a picture from 1892, and you can see down here that log right there is about half the size of that guy, and that's pretty big. So there was a study done in 1988 that recorded what was going on in 3 different mills up in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon, and they had 4 different mills that they were getting data from. And what they reported in 1988 is that all trees under 20 inches at the diameter breast height were being sent to dimensional sawmills that made like 2x4s and 2x6s and stuff that they would use to build houses. And half of all trees that were between 20 and 32-inch diameter were still getting sent there. So now it's pretty standard that trees under 16-inch diameter get used for dimensional lumber. And I'm going to say number 2 dimensional lumber because that's what we were selling to people making houses around here, which is kind of like a mid quality. Some people would buy select structural lumber, and that was a little bit more expensive, but not a lot of people use that. So you can tell the difference in these 2 pictures. That truck right there, those logs are a lot smaller than what's in this older photograph. So it's pretty undisputable that they're using smaller trees now. So the benefits of using young trees, it's a matter of quantity over quality. So you can get a lower cost product, which provides lower cost homes. You need less land for the tree farms. And these smaller logs are easier to process, which promotes, less expensive material, less expensive equipment that they use. So here you can see let's say every one of them red squares was like an acre, and every year you did 1 acre. So you'd only need 20 acres. And by the time you get to the last one, you just start over. So if they were using trees that were 40 years old instead of 20 years old, you would need twice as much land, and that's quite a bit of difference right there. So here you can see the work that they put into cutting big trees, the picture on the left. And you need big saw blades, big, rollers, big cranes, all that kind of stuff. But what most mills are doing now are these high-tech mills, and it's just that one guy sitting in the control, and he's handling all these logs and cutting them up into 2x4s and all the stuff that they need. And you can see that the one on the right, I would imagine that equipment's more expensive, but they are processing a lot more lumber with that stuff. So here is just a really basic look at how the smaller trees produces less expensive lumber. So from what I gather, it was back in like the 70s. That's when they went from true 2x4s. Like if you got a 2x4, it was actually 2 inches by 4 inches. And that's when they switched to what they have now, which is 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So each unit, so that picture there shows a unit, and every unit has 294 2x4s in it. So let's say that it's 2x4 eighths. 2 inches by 4 inches by 8 feet. If it was a true 2x4, that would be 1,568 board feet in that unit. So since they trimmed it down to 1.5 inches by 3.5, that cuts it down to a little over 1,000 board feet in that unit. So they're saving, like 50%. So if they went back to true 2x4s, that would be a 50% increase, and that would be in price. That would require larger equipment. So it's basically saving them. They're doing 2/3 of the work by processing smaller boards. So here's the drawbacks of using young trees. Now this is a matter of quality over quantity. So if you used older trees and you had like true 2x4s, then you would get higher quality homes. I know when I would deliver lumber and I would see what they were building, like the closer you got to Jackson and Pinedale, you would see that they were using 2x6 studs for their walls. And then they were using, a stud every 16 inches, no matter what. So they were putting a lot more lumber into those homes, and those homes were a lot sturdier. And you can kind of argue that older homes last longer and stuff like that, but I think the main problem people have with older homes is like things having to do with plumbing and electrical and stuff like that. But I think the structure quality is a lot better, and you can tell by the people designing these expensive homes. They put a lot more lumber in there, and they make them a lot sturdier. So that just shows that more lumber is a higher quality home. These homes were way more expensive than the ones they're selling here in town and the ones they're making here in town right now. So there's also a matter of less downtime for construction. Now, the way this works is when I was working in the lumber yard, a lot of the more higher quality builders that would build like custom homes, they really did not like a lot of the lumber that we sold them, but they couldn't get better lumber anywhere else. So they had to buy from us, but they would pick through those units and they would only pick the ones that they really liked. And one of the big reasons was, let's say the framer, he puts up a wall, and if his boards were twisted or curved or they had a lot of wane, and I'll explain what wane is here in a bit, they wouldn't want to use them and they would send them back. And the problem with the curved lumber was it would create bows in your walls. You'd be able to see your wall was not flat. It was not truly straight. The drywallers would have a hard time putting drywall on that wall. So they just had they really wanted to make that home solid and straight and true. And it was hard to do with these younger trees because there was a lot of problems with them, and I'll get to that later too. So with the lumber that they would send back, what we would end up doing is we didn't want to sell it to anybody else because it had been sitting in their job site for who knows how long, and it would just get worse and more twisted and stuff sitting in the sunlight. So we would sell it as cull. So we would basically build a whole unit of this twisted lumber and cracked and low quality lumber for like $50 or $100 for a whole unit of it. So it basically was waste. So here's a picture of wane. Now you can see on the corners up at the top that that's where the bark is, right there on those corners. So if you cut a circle and you cut a circle into your 2x4s, the ones on the edges are going to be missing chunks out of it like that shows in that picture. And that's wane. And so pretend like you're trying to screw a piece of drywall to that board, and you don't know exactly where that stud is, and you might miss it because of that wane. You might think that there's wood there, but there's not, just because of that wane right there. Creates a smaller target. So yeah, we would have a lot of lumber that came in looking like this. Maybe not so much that weathered gray looking wood, but you can tell that there's a lot of wane on that lumber. And this is an actual photograph of somebody who complained that they got a bad unit of lumber when they were trying to build a house. And this is exactly what I would see in the lumber yard. And then we would turn it into these coal units right here, and it's all twisted and stuff, and we would sell like that right there for like 20 bucks when we could sell it for I don't know, close to $200 or something, $3 a board right there. So every unit has 294 2x4s in it. And I would say a rough average, if one of our customers wanted to be picky, they would send back about 75 boards. Sometimes they would send back half the unit, sometimes they would send back less than 75 boards, but I'd say a rough average, 75 boards. That's a quarter of that unit almost. So if you look at it in terms of just board feet, and this is just simple math, that customer is expecting to buy just over 1,000 board feet. And if 75 of those boards have a 1-inch by 2-inch wane, like in that picture right there, they are getting gypped 67 board feet per unit. So if you buy multiple units, let's say you buy 8 units, you're missing 536 board feet per house. That is what you're expecting to pay for, but you are missing that 500 board feet for every house that you're building. So that's my presentation, and then I personally, I think that we should be letting our trees grow a little bit longer and have a little bit higher quality wood. But again, at the same time, I see why these companies are doing it. They can save a lot of money by only growing a tree for 20 years and letting it only be, 16, 18-inch diameter. Thanks for listening.